It was an odd year for the Dallas Cowboys. No. The year was odd, like the number. So that meant Dak Prescott was on schedule to have a great fantasy football season. That's exactly what happened. Dak finished as the quarterback 5 on the season, averaging 20.2 fantasy points per game, which was a solid return on investment as Dak was being drafted as the quarterback 11 back in August. Dak threw the ball a total of 600 times, which is a career high for the 10-year vet. Those 600 attempts turned into 4,552 yards, 30 touchdowns, and only 10 picks. Dak finished as a weekly quarterback 1 11 times, and 5 of those were inside the top 5. Dak was on a mission to show that he could still be the quarterback of America's favorite football team, the Dallas Cowboys. Dak's entire career has been under pressure, but literally this year, he had more pressure than ever, but he handled it very well. Per Player Profiler, Dak had the most pressured throws of his career at 151, and that was an 8.9% rate. That means 8.9% of the time, Dak had people in his face. For comparison, Cam Ward, who was sacked like a bajillion times, he was only pressured at a 5.5% rate. That just shows how well Dak Prescott handles pressure on and off the field. It wasn't all rainbows and lollipops for Dak Prescott, though. There was a slow start, not only for Dak, but for the entire Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys started the season just 1-2, and Dak had as many interceptions as he had touchdowns. He did turn it around quick, though, because from weeks 4 through 7, he went on a tear, throwing for 13 touchdowns and 0 picks. And he never looked back. CeeDee Lamb dropped the ball for fantasy managers in 2025. Dropped the ball in real life too. Depending on your source, they counted 8 total drops. I could have swore that was only week 1 though. CeeDee had a very pedestrian year for his standards with only 75 catches, 1,077 yards, and only 3 touchdowns. He was just the wide receiver 1 a couple seasons ago. And this year, he finished wide receiver 17. 1 spot below Michael Wilson. To be fair, CeeDee did miss 3 games, but also to be fair, Michael Wilson! CeeDee still demanded 8.4 targets per game, and he was heavily involved in that offense. He just didn't feel like CeeDee Lamb, and this was because for the first time in his career, he was playing second fiddle to another wide receiver. In May, the Dallas Cowboys made a move for Steelers wide receiver George Pickens, and his cost was only a 2026 third-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick. Bold strategy, Jerry, but it worked. Pickens finished as a wide receiver 4, which was a massive boost compared to his wide receiver 42 performance from the year before. Pickens set a career high in every major receiving category, including targets, yards, catches, touchdowns, you name it, he set it. Pickens had 93 catches, 1,429 yards, and 9 touchdowns. This is the same person who struggled with consistency in Pittsburgh. Before Dallas, the consensus of George Pickens was he was a very streaky player, and honestly, the big weeks never outweighed the very low weeks in Pittsburgh. But in 2025, the string on the yo-yo was much shorter, as his low weeks were more of a low-end wide receiver 2 instead of a high-end wide receiver 3. And that's because he had support from a stable offense that supported 2 high-end wide receivers and a tight end. Jake Ferguson started the season like a bat out of hell. Jake was the tight end 1 the entire first half of the season. It had many fantasy managers questioning their first-round pick on Brock Bowers. Jake Ferguson finishes with 82 catches, 600 yards, and 8 touchdowns, while operating as Dak Prescott's short area safety valve. Earlier in the year, he piled up receptions, including big PPR outings like 9 catches for 78 yards against the Giants, or 13 catches for 82 yards against Chicago. But his production leaned heavily on volume rather than efficiency. He reflected a career-low 7.3 yards per catch. His best stretch came mid-season, where he erupted for 5 touchdowns across 3 games, including 2 score performances against Washington and the New York Jets, briefly pushing him into the top tier of weekly tight end plays. However, Dallas's offense sputtered late, and Ferguson's role shrank, producing just 1 touchdown over his final 6 games and multiple sub-20-yard performances. Overall, he delivered a reliable tight end 1 fringe season built on targets and red zone usages, but his lack of big playability definitely kept him away from joining the elite class of fantasy tight ends. Javonte Williams, the guy who didn't do well in Denver, the guy we all wrote off, the guy we all underdrafted, he delivered one of the most efficient and productive seasons of his career. He was a true running back 1 thanks to volume, explosiveness, and he scored a lot of touchdowns. He logged 252 carries, 1,201 yards, and 11 rushing touchdowns. Again, the touchdowns mattered here. He also added 35 receptions for 137 yards and added 2 more touchdowns through the air, giving him 13 total. His 4.8 yards per carry marked a strong bounce back in efficiency, and he was the true workhorse in Dallas. There was nobody else. Williams opened the season hot, scoring 2 touchdowns in week 1, and we all looked at each other like, is this real? It's going to happen all year? In week 2, he posted 130 total yards and a touchdown. Yeah, I guess this is real, so we immediately established him as the running back 1 in Dallas, maybe in the league. His biggest explosion came in week 5 against the Jets, where he ripped off 135 yards on 16 carries. That's an 8.4 yards per carry for y'all if you didn't know math, and a touchdown, showcasing the burst, tackle breaking ability that made him a fantasy difference throughout the year. By the time midseason came around, Williams was already established as one of the most reliable backs in the season, stacking up games like 93 yards against Vegas or 87 total yards against Philadelphia, 91 total yards against Minnesota, rarely dipping below a 4 yards per carry. Even in losses, he maintained strong usage. He never lost a grip on the running back 1 ability. He was able to pass pro and was available during all passing downs. The Dallas Cowboys in 2025 were amazing for your fantasy football team, and a lot of that had to do with their lack of defensive efforts. To improve this year, they're going to need to add on defense. They don't need to add much on offense, but as fantasy managers, do we really want them adding defense? We like the 40-point shootouts. We need Dak to throw the ball 600 times a year. We want CeeDee and Pickens to obtain 120 or more targets per year. For real-life purposes, yes, improve that defense. For fantasy purposes, keep on doing what you're doing, guys.